Hey friends, it's Len here from 1A Auto. So today in the studio, I wanted to talk to you about some common and potentially dangerous mistakes that you can make when you're trying to install front struts on your vehicle. Let's talk about it. So I was out this weekend and I was going to get some blueberry bushes. The only problem with those things is the ones I got. Oh gosh. Oh no. Great. I was distracted. Unbelievable. Let's get this out of here. Oh. All right, so these mistakes happen. I wasn't paying attention. I was talking to somebody while I'm trying to do this. Obviously, you want to try to be as safe as possible. And another thing I noticed, I was wearing my safety glasses, but in the wrong spot. Great. Anyways, we're gonna jack this up a little bit and get ready to start doing this strut. Couple other places that you definitely don't want to put a jack or a stand. One of them might be underneath the control arm. You can see that this is at an angle, especially when it's hanging. Not to mention, if you're going to be replacing the strut, you don't want any upward pressure on this control arm. Aside from that, tranny pan, oil pan, exhaust, pretty much anything else except for something that's solid like the subframe, the pinch rail, which is right along here, or I guess if you had to, you could try to add a little bit of support right along this area here. Now these bolts just don't come loose, so I'm going to go ahead and heat them up. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, so obviously heating up this nut right here to help break it free probably isn't the best idea, especially if you still have your brake hose, your ABS wire still connected. Not to mention, this is a gas-filled strut right here, so by adding heat to this, you could potentially cause some serious damage and even an explosion in severe cases. Commonly when replacing struts, you might find that your sway bar link is directly attached to it. So of course you're gonna have to remove the nut that holds the stud to the strut. Ah, of course, the nut isn't gonna come off. What am I gonna do? Let's try some locking pliers back here. Wait a minute. Oh yeah. So this isn't coming off. I'm gonna try to heat it up. Oh, here we go again. As you can tell, using locking pliers on the backside of this to hold the stud, or even trying to heat it up with a torch, probably isn't the best idea. It's gonna end up ruining the sway bar link, so you're gonna have to replace that at the same time as doing the strut, which of course is gonna cost you a little bit more money. The best way to do this is if you look in the middle of the stud here, you can tell that it has an Allen head area. Typically it's either gonna look like that, or even something that you can put another socket on, and then you can wrench this off. Essentially, you just wanna hold that stud and then spin the nut off. Let's go ahead and separate this. That was a horrible idea. I just pulled apart my CV joint. Let's have a look at what's going on inside of your CV axle. This right here would be approximately where that boot would be that we just end up pulling on. As I pull this apart, you can tell that it has bearings inside. Obviously, if I end up pulling this apart and then I try putting it together while there's a boot, maybe I can get it lined up, maybe I can't. There's always the possibility that this could end up popping off of here. If it pops off and all those little roller bearings fall off of there, you can imagine you're gonna have a serious issue with your axle. Now, not only did I potentially damage my axle and my boot, but I also put a big tug on my brake hose right here. Also, I might have potentially put a tug on this. This is my ABS wire and it's very delicate. So how can we avoid this situation? What I would do is just come right out here and remove the axle nut. Use a punch and a hammer, break this free. Also, you want to take off any other mounting points that hold your brake hoses or, of course, ABS wires. That's going to give everything plenty of slack. Now we can move along to removing our mounting bolts here that hold the knuckle to the strut. Something to pay attention to is the direction that they came out of. You want to make sure when you put them back in, they're facing in the same direction. Also, what you might happen to notice, which doesn't really show on this one, you might potentially have alignment adjustment bolts or cam bolts. Essentially what you would find on that is it's not a round looking bolt like this, it would be a little bit more oblong, almost like an egg type shaped. The reason for that is because the alignment professional is going to be able to go ahead and turn this, and that's going to make it so this can angle like this. So if you do happen to find that one of your bolts has that oblong shape to it, you want to make sure that it goes back in the same hole. If you end up messing it up, it's going to cause a severe issue with your alignment, especially for the alignment professional. So now that we know we have plenty of slack on our wires and our hoses, let's just go ahead and take this out of here, and we'll let this come down. Now that we have the lower aspect apart, let's get back up top. Let's start by removing our center nut here. Wait a minute. Great. Well, that was the third stupidest thing I've done so far. Boy, this isn't going well at all. At this point, look what I did. I just completely crushed my ABS wire, I damaged my axle boot here, and of course, I damaged my tie rod boot. This is getting to be a big mess, and it's gonna be a big job overall. How am I gonna get this out of here now? Oh, jeez. What I should have done is not touch that center nut at all, but just remove these 3 mounting bolts up along the top. And then of course you just reach underneath, grab onto that strut, remove your last nut up here, and then you can lower this right down. Now I guess you could say in this situation I got a little lucky. And the reason why I'm saying I got a little lucky is because I didn't actually get hurt, which is good. Because if you could imagine the amount of spring tension that this was under when it came shooting apart, if I had the complete strut out and in my hands and I touched that center bolt and started removing it, this is gonna make it come shooting apart and it could potentially hurt me or even kill me. Now obviously compressing or decompressing the spring when you're dealing with your struts is gonna be one of the most unsafe portions of this job. A lot of times most people aren't necessarily gonna have a big old machine like this that they can put the spring into and compress it. This is gonna be the safest way. Of course, I'm always wearing hand protection and eye protection. That's just the way I am. Aside from that, what people more than likely will have are something that looks more like this. They've got a couple little hooks on them, and essentially it would just go around the coil like this, and then of course you could squeeze it right together. Well, this is great and everything, an exception of the fact that if you were to look at these coils, they come down at a slant and it keeps coming down and around. They're not perfectly straight across. So with that said, after I start tightening this, it could potentially keep sliding down, 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 and then if both of them came to one side, you can imagine that this coil is gonna be bent like a horseshoe. So now before I start taking this apart, I just wanted to go over the importance of having a tool that's gonna be able to compress the spring right here. The spring is gonna be forcing the strut in this direction. It's trying to separate it. So of course, if I was to just take off this nut, the strut and everything's just gonna come shooting right apart. Now that I have this all completely torn apart, let me ask you a question real quick. Does it make sense to just go ahead and replace only the strut without the spring and of course without the mount along the top? Let's just keep this old stuff inside here. That really makes sense to me. Or does it make a little bit more sense to just go ahead and get yourself a complete strut assembly right here? Something like this is gonna be amazing. You don't have to do very much work at all. You've already done all the hard part. Aside from that, the only thing that I would mention is if you're gonna do one side, you're gonna wanna do the other. And that's the case whether you're just replacing the strut or of course the whole assembly. Now by only replacing one strut, you might find that your car is sitting off kilter like this. You can imagine that this is going to be very unsafe for you driving down the road. This could affect the steering and the stability of your vehicle while you're driving. Why might someone even want to replace only the spring, only the strut, or only even the mount? Well, of course, if you were to look at this one, you might find that you have a broken spring on this, but for some reason the rest of the strut looks like it's fairly decent, if not okay. Well, why not just replace the spring? Save a couple bucks, right? Or even maybe you look inside here and you can see that you have fluid coming out of there, but the spring itself still looks decent, and of course the cap, well, you know, sure, that looks fine as well. So, like I said before, let's save a couple bucks and just go about doing it the hard way. For me personally, I'm just gonna go ahead and get myself a complete strut assembly, get it as a pair, and then of course once it's all fully installed, which is gonna be much easier than doing it the hard way, I'll just go ahead and get myself in alignment and be down the road. Now when it comes time to putting it all back together, you want to make sure that your spring is lined up with the area that it needs to be. So essentially if you were to look at your strut, typically you can see like an area where it has a little bobble. That's exactly where the end of the spring needs to be. If I put it like this and tighten this up and drive down the road, there's always the possibility that this is going to shake like that. And then of course you're going to find that your alignment and everything else just gets all out of whack. Now obviously using this 1/2-inch air gun right here to go ahead and snug this up and then really reef it down, that's gonna cause a very big possibility of damaging your bearing that's located inside this cap right here. Commonly, when you go ahead and tighten this down and you start squeezing down the bearings on there, they're gonna start to bind up. And of course, when you're driving down the road and you start to make a couple turns, you're gonna hear like a kong kong, kong kong, kong. So that noise you're hearing is the bearings essentially telling you that you went ahead and you tightened it down too much and they're pretty much screaming for help. Just go ahead and snug it and then make sure that you use your torque wrench. Let's get the strut back in here. Start my bolts on. We'll get back up here and torque these down in a little bit. Now, when it comes time to putting in your bolts, you definitely don't want to go ahead and spray them down with a whole bunch of copper never-sees. But when you do go to put in your bolts, it's a good idea to add a little bit of copper never-sees just along the straight shanked area here, and then of course some red thread locker on the threads. You definitely want to be very careful if you're jacking up your control arm to try to line everything up. Obviously, I wasn't paying attention, and I jammed the axle right up into the strut. Let's get this thing back together. Whoa! Oh, jeez. Let's start putting in those bolts. Wait a minute. This doesn't go through from that side. Just through from this side. Okay, now that we have both those in, let's go over here. Look at that. Oh, of course. I put it together without putting the ABS wire on the right side. Ugh. Oh, come on. Now what? Oh, the axle's not in there. There we go. Cool. Let's get this axle nut on here. Well, it looks like I better go ahead and tighten this up a little bit more. Tightening your axle nut with an air gun is very dangerous, especially for your wheel bearing. The reason for that is because, of course, your axle is going to come through this hub area here. Behind the hub, there's going to be a whole bunch of bearings. You can imagine if I had this together, and then I went ahead and squeezed this down with a whole bunch of pressure like from that air gun. What's it going to do to these bearings? It's going to overheat them because they're going to be completely compressed. Friction causes heat, and of course that causes damage. You definitely want to make sure that you have a torque wrench available to be able to torque your axle nut. Okay, so now let's get the wheel back on here. The next thing that we're going to do is go ahead and snug up these lug nuts. We want to do this in a crisscross manner. After that, we'll get the wheel back down on the ground, and we're going to make sure that we torque it to manufacturer's specifications. If you don't do it this exact way, there's always the possibility that the wheel is going to be off kilter, and every time you hit a bump, it might potentially loosen up your lug nuts, and then in worst case scenario, the wheel falls off. Great! Oh. As you can tell, by not paying attention and not torquing things the way that I should have, I caused quite a bit of damage to this car. Don't hammer them on with your air gun. Now, as far as the upper strut bolts are concerned, you definitely want to make sure that you put these on and snug them with the wheel on the ground and the weight of the body down on the ground as well. The reason for that is because, of course, it's going to make sure that this is settled where it needs to be, and the studs are going to be in the fully up position. If I went ahead and tightened this up while it was still hanging, yeah, I might have gotten it up there. Is it sitting perfectly? I really don't know. Something else to pay attention to, though, is, of course, you might potentially skip or even forget about this point. Maybe you're all excited because you just got it down on the ground, you went ahead and you torqued that wheel because you want to make sure you're safe as possible, you shut the hood and you go out for a road test. And then what? You're probably going to hear banging and clunking over bumps. This looks pretty good. I don't think I need an alignment. What was I saying? I don't need an alignment. Of course I need an alignment. You need to make sure that you get a four-wheel alignment anytime that you do any type of front end work, whether it's suspension or even steering. One other thing that I want to mention real quick, if you have to replace the front struts for anything, why wouldn't you just replace the rear shocks at the same time? You're driving down the same road with the front as you are with the rear. It only makes sense to me. Okay friends, so that's pretty much what I've got for you for common and potentially dangerous strut installation mistakes. I hope you liked the video. I hope you learned a little something. Maybe you've got a car that you did some struts on with a little story of your own. If you got something to talk about, leave it in the comment section below, because I always love to hear from you. Of course, if you liked the video or even loved the video, make sure you smash on that like button for me. It would mean the world. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe and ring the bell. That way there you can be kept up with all of our latest content. Thanks. Let's get this thing off of here. That's safe.